Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Thanks for joining me today. This first DIY is using these Dollar Tree beer glasses. They look like Pilsner glasses. I think that's what they are. Anyhow, when you flip them upside down, they look like milk bottles. So that's what I'm going to create. I'm going to take them outside and give them a couple of coats of this enamel flat white paint. They turn out really nice. Then I'm going to use my DIY chalk paint in black and give the bottoms, which are going to be the tops, a coat pretending that this is like the little cap or the lid. So I'm going to go around the top really well, and then I'm going to go about a half an inch down. I'm not going to be precise with a painter's tape or anything. I'm just going to use my brush and go all the way around the edge like this. Using my Cricut, I created this little label. I cut it out and I'm going to apply it on each of the bottles. I'm still very new to my Cricut Joy, so I did get a few wrinkles when putting this decal on top of the rounded edges here, but I think that just added a little bit of charm. I'm going to go across it with a dry brush in white just to make the label look a little bit more aged and distressed. To make them look a little bit more farmhouse, I'm going to take some of this black and white baker's twine, wrap it around the neck of the bottle a couple of times, and then just tie it in a regular little bow. I am so excited to share with you that I am joining these wonderful creators, and we're challenging ourselves to do a What Would You Do challenge. What we did is use this interactive spinner that has all the Dollar Tree aisles listed on it, and we spun it 3 times to get hardware auto, kitchen, and glassware. Then we all went to the Dollar Tree into those aisles and chose something to create some home decor. The second project is starting off by taking either an oatmeal container. This happened to be a big breadcrumb container. It has a nice rounded shape, and I just cut it into the shape of a vase. So the bottom piece of wood here is just one of the Easter signs from the Dollar Tree that I cut down a little bit smaller. To create a flat back for this vase, I'm gluing it onto a piece of cardboard, and then I'm going to cut it out. When you're done watching my video, please make sure you head down to my description box, click on that playlist link, and go see what everyone else has created with the items they chose. So I picked up the polypropylene rope that's available in the hardware auto section of the Dollar Tree. And this is that really hard nylon rope that you would use outdoors, maybe to hang something or to tie down a tarp. I know I used it a lot when I went camping. I'm going to just cut strips and glue them in a row from the bottom all the way to the top of this vase. Now that I've got the front all finished, I've got to figure out how to get these extra little rope pieces to fold over in the back. And that was my original plan. But I found that this rope is way too hard. You can see me trying to figure out here how I'm going to bend it over, and it just wasn't working. I tried using tape and all sorts of things. I eventually just ended up cutting the edges as close to the cardboard as I could. And now I'm just taking a little bit of a flame and just melting them because they are plastic so they don't continue to fray. I'm going to use some of this bare antique wax to brush onto the basket and make it look like a basket. I don't want any of that shiny white color to be showing through, so I am applying it fairly heavily, making sure that I get in between all of the little grooves. And I'm also putting it a little heavier in some spots than others because I wanted it to have variations in color. Now it's time to work on the little board. I'm going to paint it with a couple coats of white DIY chalk paint. Using the same brush, I'm just kind of going across the antique wax a little bit just to give it more of an old look. It ended up blending in a little bit too much, so I went over it again with a little more wax. Now it was time to figure out how to camouflage those little rope ends. So I took some Dollar Tree nautical rope and just glued it all the way around. And I believe I did 4 rows. And here's where you can see the red of that cardboard. If I would have been thinking, I would have flipped it around so you would just see the brown cardboard on the back. So what I ended up needing to do to hide that is add another piece of cardboard on top. The piece of cardboard that I used was just the back of an old picture frame that I didn't need, and I just cut out the shape of it and hot glued it in place. I also needed to camouflage the top and back and the inside a little bit of this vase. So I'm using this fine weave burlap ribbon that I got at Michael's a while ago. I really like it because it is really a nice tight weave. And what I'm going to do is just let it hang over a little bit and then tuck the rest of it in. I started by gluing the center and working my way out to the sides, making the ribbon bend up just a little wee bit to match the angle of the vase. And then I also glued it on the inside when I folded it over. I did the same thing for the back. If you're coming over from the playlist, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button. So now I'm going to work a little bit more on the backing board, and I'm taking some of these shims that I get at the Home Depot, and I'm just going to frame out the little white board just so it looks a little bit more rustic. I'm just going to apply them with hot glue and cut them down to size. For the top piece, because shims are thicker on one side and thinner on the other, I took 2 pieces that were kind of the same in thickness and glued them together so they would have the same thickness as the board and the 2 other pieces of wood. And then I just glued them in place. I used a rag and the same antique wax just to darken up the wood shims a little bit. And then I also took a brush, dipped it in the wax, and then just used that as a little bit of dry brushing to bring in a little bit more of the wood grain look. To attach the basket to the wood, I drilled in a couple of holes, and I'm also going to drill in a couple of holes into the back of the basket. And then I'm going to be able to take some regular jute twine, feed it through, and tie the basket on. I also added a little bit of hot glue at the very bottom just to hold the cardboard and the actual board together. I added a couple of bunches of greenery and I think it looks so cute. My last project is from the kitchen, and I'm using these 2 scrapers that you can get in the kitchen aisle at Dollar Tree. And I love using this little razor scraper to push off all of the labels. They all come off in one big piece. It's amazing. Then I go with a little bit of pure acetone and a little cotton round, and the rest of that glue residue comes right off. I was also able to just take off all of the little numbers that are on the bottom of the scraper. I love using high heat barbecue paint for a black matte finish. It's a really funky thing to use, but I came upon it by accident and it works extremely well. Wonderful coverage and dries totally flat. Now I grabbed this cutting board that I got at my Dollarama store. It was $4. It's solid bamboo, and I really like the lines of it because it has that little groove in the front there. I'm going to give it 1 coat of black chalk paint. Now this is a DIY chalk paint that I'm using, and I just want to do a black underneath because I'm going to be painting it white, but I want to have that black color underneath. So when I distress it, you can see the black and possibly some of the wood. As you can see here, I spray painted the bottom side of the scraper as well. And now I'm just penciling out where I want them to sit on the bottom of the tray. These scrapers are going to serve as handles for my serving tray. The bottom of the cutting board is going to get a couple of coats of white chalk paint, and I'm going to make sure I go around those pencil lines because I want to be able to glue those metal scrapers onto the bare wood. I don't want to glue them on top of the paint because I want them to have a permanent hold, and sometimes when you glue on top of chalk paint, it lifts off. I'm going to use my favorite permanent glue, which is Weld Bond glue, and that's what I'm going to use to adhere the scrapers right onto the cutting board. I noticed some yellowing coming through as the chalk paint was drying on the bottom, so I'm going to take this Rust-Oleum paint and primer. It is a satin clear and it's a sealer. So what that's going to do is seal the paint in, and then when I do the second coat, I won't get any more yellowing. Since I had to spray the bottom, I decided I was just going to be on the safe side and spray the top part as well before I start putting the white paint on top. Once the sealer was completely dry, I went ahead and gave this 2 coats of white chalk paint. I decided to give the tray some feet so it would stand up a little bit and it would be easier to grab the handles. I'm just going to put some Weld Bond glue on the bottom of each one and then put it in place and let it dry. Weld Bond glue only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get a firm hold so you can continue to work on your project. I used my Cricut Joy to create this stencil, and I cut it out using plastic poster board that I got at Michael's. Using a makeup sponge and some chalk paint in black, I'm going to pounce all over the stencil, making sure I don't have the makeup sponge too loaded with paint and that I'm going with an up and down motion so I don't get any bleeding. I'm going to distress it using some coarse grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to be able to run it along all of these edges and pull up some of that white paint to show the black underneath. If you wanted to go even further, you could go a little bit deeper with it and then some of the brown would show through as well. But I'm really happy with just showing the black. I'm also going to run the sandpaper over the letters to distress them a little bit and also the rest of the cutting board. The glue for the blocks has had a good chance to dry, so I'm just going to take a smaller paintbrush and paint them black. The final step will be to take that Rust-Oleum clear coat and do the top and the bottom and all the sides just to make sure that none of the paint will chip. Don't forget to go check out the playlist to see what everyone else created with their What Would You Do items. If you like this kind of content, I would love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button. Those 2 black arrows will show you exactly where to click. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Bye for now.